Recording in progress. Okay, so welcome to the third episode. Oh no, although this is going to be delayed a bit, so this might be the fourth, might be the fifth, might be the third, don't know yet. Episode of my experimental podcast that I'm currently calling the Leave One Kenobi Show. And normally my podcast is usually a one-on-one, which I kind of like, but I thought for Father's Day, I'd mix it up a little and have two guests. And so here we have Anthony, who's on TikTok, and for a Father's Day special, if you're going to have a dad, Super Bomb Bad Dad is the one you want to have. And then, of course, the legendary J. Kevin Parker. Welcome to the show, guys. Thanks for taking the time to be here. Anthony, you know I freaking love you, even though we've never met. Like, we've come so close to meeting.
Missed opportunities here and there, yep, for sure.
Yep, so close. And Kevin, I like you as a friend, but I think you are probably the coolest dude on. You do a job that I cannot do. I've been following you since account number 2, I think.
Oh, awesome.
And you do a job that I can never do. I tried once where I put a controversial post up and I was just mentally exhausted fighting people the entire day. So definitely want to have you on a one-on-one, because the main question I'm going to ask then is, how do you do it? But we will cross that bridge another time. So, gentlemen, why don't you officially introduce yourself and tell us maybe how many kids you have and how you also got into Star Wars. So we can start with Kevin, if you want to start off.
Okay. Hi, I'm Kevin. Thanks for that very interesting, flattering introduction. I appreciate that. I have 5 kids, which is a lot by today's standards, but in the grand scheme of things, it's not that many. Yeah, so they range from age from 8 to, I have 2 that are in college. So it's a good group of people. I'm very biased because they're mine, but I love my kids a lot, and I think they're 5 of the most amazing humans on the planet. And yeah, and I was asking them today, which Star Wars did I show you first? Because I know that's something we're going to talk about. But I got into Star Wars as a baby, literally a baby, because I was a baby when A New Hope came out, and my family drugged me to the drive-in theater. I don't remember that one, but I do remember the next 2 because I was old enough. But it's just always been part of my culture.
Are your parents into Star Wars?
Not really. My parents were already in their late 30s when Star Wars came out, and just wasn't something that I think really interested them. My mom has watched all the movies, but I don't think my dad ever got around to seeing any of the movies after Return of the Jedi came out. So
I tried showing my parents The Force Awakens, and we started it, and about 20 minutes later, I looked over, and they're just both like, "Oh, I tried."
Wow. Yeah, you did. You tried.
Yeah. Anthony, so why don't you tell us about yourself, your kids, and how you got into Star Wars?
Yeah, my name's Anthony. I also have 5 kids. I have 3 from my first marriage, and then a stepson and a son with my wife, who passed away a couple of years ago. So yeah, I got into Star Wars. I mean, it's one of those things where I always remember Star Wars being around. Same as Kevin, I think I was born the year Empire came out, shortly before it was released. So all of my memories were well after they had already hit the theaters, and it was all toys and merchandise and playing with everything, watching them on VHS. And so that's when I really got into Star Wars, was early on, but it was after the big rush that a lot of other people got to experience when it hit the theaters.
Awesome. So, and as far as me, I have 2. I feel like such the underdog with you 2. Just 2, boy and a girl. A boy and a girl, and they are both completely awesome in their both unique ways. So let's get to fatherhood in Star Wars, and we can start with Anthony in this one. The most important question, and also I hope Mark Kenobi watches this, because I know he's a new dad, so he might find this informative, or any new dads out there, or dads to be. The important question, and I researched this: what order did you show the movies to your kids, and at what age? ish?
Um,
Is all range ginormously in it?
we started watching it when they were very small. I mean, my twins were very young, so they were anything longer than 5 minutes they wouldn't pay attention to. But my daughter was around, 4 or 5 when we first started watching, and she enjoyed it. Again, it's a lot for a little kid to take in, but I would always be watching it, putting it on the background as kind of a background noise, and it was always around or always on for them. And I always showed it to them in numerical order, not release order. So
Really?
for me, yeah,
Wow.
because the Vader being the father is the big surprise, the big reveal. But then to watch and see someone who, as a child, to be the hero of the story, have no knowledge that he becomes the villain at some point. Watching a turn to the dark side, for me and for the kids, I think was a lot more impactful than finding out that the bad guy was the good guy's father later on. So yeah, just watching this evolution, this turn from good to evil, someone that they were rooting for initially in the pod races is now essentially, slaughtering younglings, and it's like a big shock for little ones to see that. So yeah, so that's how we did it. We did it in order, and then them getting to see it in the theaters for the sequel trilogy, I think is really cool because they have all the other ones under their belt at that point. So yeah.
Kevin, what about yourself?
Well, I we did release order. I think for all the kids, maybe at least
Really?
4 of the 5
Oh, release order. Yeah.
release order. Yeah, and the reason there are a couple of reasons. Honestly, and this is what I tell anybody who asks me this question, what they should do if they're new to the franchise. It there's a lot of factors. Like it depends. I think both have their merits, like exactly what Anthony just described. But for me, I liked the reveal that Darth Vader was Luke's father, uh, partially because that was not really planned in the first movie, and so it was such a surprise in the second one. And I think it was a good twist. But also because when my kids were very young when I introduced each of them to Star Wars. My twins were probably 2 or 3 when they first watched it, and they, it, I didn't let them watch Revenge of the Sith until they were like 10 or 11.
Was that because of the burning?
Yes, and interestingly, I've even seen interviews with George Lucas many, many years later that he said, "Well, that part's not for kids, but everything else is for kids, but not that part." And I'm like, "Yeah, exactly what I thought." So now, as parents tend to do, I younger and younger with each kid. Like
Sure.
my youngest is 8, and she's seen all the movies years ago, and I can't remember when I showed her Revenge of the Sith, but I did try to like, hey, maybe don't pay attention to this part for a while. So yeah.
That's um that's awesome. I showed so for me, I tried to clone my my son. You're right. My daughter was just there for the ride, but my son, I said, I was 8 years old when it came out, so I'm going to show him A New Hope when he's 8, and he's gonna. I want him to be able to understand it and comprehend it and do whatever. But The Force Awakens pushed my hand because I'm like, oh my God, this is going to be his theater movie,
Mm.
and this is going to be both their theater movie, and I think Henry was 6 at the time, and Hadley might have been 4. And I'm like, I guess we got to go. Because I remember once a babysitter called and said, hey, what are you guys doing? She's like, oh, we just started watching Star Wars. And I'm like, no, this is why I had kids. You can't take this from me. Like, turn that off immediately. Like, how far did you get into it? And they're like, just to crawl. I'm like, no, no, no. This is why I had kids. You cannot do this to me. So we did do release order. And again, with the Vader thing, when it approached, I turned up the volume because I'm like, okay, this is it. This is it. And Vader said, the spoiler alert, I'm your father. And none of my kids blinked. And I'm like, all right, let's rewind it. Okay, guys, pay attention. Nothing. I'm like, I don't get it. So then when the credits roll after Empire, my son's like, wait, 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 wait. I have a question. I'm like, okay, here we go. And he's like, what happened to Han Solo? And I'm like, oh, dude, that's in the next movie. I'm like, that's in the next movie. So let's talk about theater, your kid's first theater experience. I'm going to assume for the most of them, Kevin has older kids, but I'm going to assume the sequel trilogy might be their first theater experience. Kevin?
For sure, my two youngest, that was their first Star Wars theater experience. In fact, I can't even recall for sure if my youngest attended, because she would have been, oh, like three or four. So I don't remember if I brought her. I'm pretty sure I brought her sister and the older siblings. For my sons, I yeah, they were definitely not around for the first couple of prequels. They were babies, I think, when uh, the Attack of the Clones came out, and so, and again, I didn't let them watch Revenge of the Sith for a long time, but for them, their first theater experience with Star Wars, my oldest kids, all three of them, it was the Clone Wars movie.
Yep.
And I know that isn't a very popular piece of the franchise in terms
Oh,
of the
great.
cinema, but I loved it because my kids loved it, and I thought, okay, this is going to branch out. There's more new Star Wars content. Of course, you know that every generation we've had people not liking the current Star Wars, right? So that's always been fun. But yeah, so it varied in ages for them, but I would say Force Awakens for two of them, if or possibly it was. It could have been The Last Jedi for my youngest.
Okay. And Anthony, what was your kid's first theater experience? And also, fun fact, Kevin, Anthony is in the 501st and Rebel Legion as a clone.
Nice.
I forget which clone you are.
It's Commander Gray from the Canon comic series.
Okay, perfect.
He got retconned here recently in the Bad Batch cartoon too, so that was a
Oh.
little disappointing to see your clones on the big screen or small screen rather, and it's not what you had hoped or imagined it would be. But at least he made it on there, so that's
Sure.
fun. Yeah, so my kids, their first theater experience was Force Awakens. I always make a point to watch it first, on my own, so I can experience it as a fan myself. Because obviously, as you know, with kids come a ton of questions: who's this and why is that? So I wanted to make sure that I had at least one viewing under my belt before I took them to see it. But that was their first, was Force Awakens, and then I can't really remember their reaction. The reaction that stood out for me the most was. After Last Jedi, like in unison, they all stood up and said this was their favorite Star Wars movie ever. And then for the Rise of Skywalker, or the Rise of Skywalker, again, it was kind of a muted reaction. They were happy to have seen it and watched it, but I think for my kids, like their Star Wars is the Mandalorian. That's the thing that all of the kids rally around now. We huddle around the TV, we make snacks or get ice cream or something. It's an event, right? So it's very cinematic too, that show. So it's not in the theaters, but it's very theatrical. And I think that's their Star Wars more than anything else, for our family, at least, and my kids. It's definitely the Mandalorian, Grogu, all that good stuff. They love that.
Absolutely. I could not agree more. First of all, everyone's like, "Oh, Grogu, he probably got killed by Ben Solo, whatever." First of all, Grogu is to be back in the third season because, from a business point of view, he's a cash cow. I mean, he brings in a lot of money for Disney. And secondly, I think a lot of people watch the show. Like I'm in what I call a mixed marriage, where my wife's not into any fandoms. She's into the Mandalorian because of Grogu. Like Grogu is bringing in the super casual fan, so I can't imagine he's gone. But and Kevin, you made a great point also about how much content we're getting, and our kids are very lucky. I'm more closer to age than Kevin, but in 1977, 1980, and 83, that was it. I mean, we had a Ewok movie here and there, and comic books and trading cards, but that was it. And until the prequels, and it's just crazy to me that a lot of these fans are bashing these movies, particularly the sequel trilogy, where I'm like, you guys don't know how lucky you are. Like, come back to 1978, where we just had the holiday special air, and I loved it. But that just amazes me. But I'm digressing, and again, I can't wait to have both of you on a one-on-one because it's just so much to talk about with Star Wars. Do you feel the prequel trilogy got a lot of hate, as people don't remember, but we probably remember. Let's talk about Jar Jar, and we'll start with Anthony this time. What did your kids think of like Jar Jar, and if anything, or Dex, or Anakin turning to the dark side? Like, did they have any thoughts about it, or?
We go back to that question, in which order did I show them the movies? And I think for them, there's a lot of saturation in other media, like Luke, I am your father. No, I am your father. So that
Right.
was kind of spoiled for them early on. They seem to always know that Vader was his father. So there was no big surprise for them, which is kind of why, again, I did 1 through 6 before going on to the sequel. But for the characters in the prequel trilogy, like Jar Jar, again, it's one of those things where they just kind of accept it. They don't like gravitate towards Jar Jar or any of like the animated side characters. They're just there. They're not annoyed by him like a lot of people seem to be. But he's not like on the level of Grogu, for example, right? That's definitely catered towards kids, or at least it seems like it was meant to be at least. But they didn't really have feelings about him one way or the other. He was just a funny character, comic relief. And then my son actually yesterday came up and said, they should make a movie about Darth Jar Jar. So I guess there's that picture, that meme that's floating around with him looking super evil as a Sith Lord.
Him and
Uh,
him and
yeah.
Palpatine were both from Naboo, so they probably could have
Mhm.
just chatted a bit.
So yeah, he's using his imagination. He sees that, and he sees something that Jar Jar could have been that would have been even cooler than he was. So, he talks about him in that sense. But other than that, they don't really seem to have any feelings about it one way or the other. But yeah, I think they were pretty taken away or taken aback by the fact that uh, Anakin became Darth Vader. They didn't really put the Skywalker name together early on, but when they saw that turn and they saw that change, I think that kind of threw them for a loop. That's Darth Vader. That's how he started. So I didn't really tell him any of that stuff.
Do you think the Clone Wars cartoon also helped with the storyline of Anakin to Vader?
Honestly, they aren't really interested in that, except for my youngest daughter, the one who cosplays as Numa. She really likes the clones. She likes the characters from there, Ahsoka and Numa. So she's rewatching all of it with me now. We're like restarting the first season, but she's the only one that had interest in the Clone Wars cartoon. So now she's like in a place where she can understand it and kind of get more out of it. So she's really enjoying the rewatch.
Got it. And Kev, what were your family's thoughts of, like, say, Jar Jar, Dex, and the prequels?
Jar Jar is the key to all this,
Hey,
according
that's a
to
Lucas. That's a Lucas quote right
Lucas.
there.
Yeah. You know, personally, like I thought Jar Jar was fine. When I saw him, I wasn't like, "Hey, that's my new favorite character." But at the same time, I thought, "Oh, he's annoying, kind of like C-3PO was. He's the comic relief." And that's exactly how I processed it when I saw the Phantom Menace, and it never bothered me. And so much that my kids always thought he was pretty cool, like a funny character. In fact, one of my son's usernames, and for a while I was worried that I was cursing him forever, is E Jar Jar. His name's Elijah.
That's
So I called him E Jar Jar once as a joke. So his username on all the social media has been E Jar Jar. And I thought, I've cursed this kid because so many people hate Jar Jar Binks. And it turns out not so much anymore. And I do think the Clone Wars helped a lot with his character as much as it did with Anakin's in
oh,
different
I
ways.
agree.
And I just, yeah, they've never understood why people would hate a character, well, any character really, other than Ponkrell. But it's just something that's just not in their nature to just hate a character. They could say, that one's not for me. But Jar Jar was always cool. Other characters, like from the Clone Wars, of course, they really liked. My son's favorite movie is Revenge of the Sith, but they're not. There's two kinds of people who that's their favorite movie. They're not the bad kind. They're they're the good kind, because it is a great film. Yeah, I'm trying to think if I even know what their favorite characters are, because that changes, right? Like my list has changed a lot in the last 5 years.
I gotta tell you, whenever I do like a TikTok live, people always ask me what's my favorite movie, and I can't really answer it. I would almost rather, if Empire Strikes Back was on TV and, like, The Force Awakens was on TV, which one would you watch? But I don't think I could put it in an order.
Yeah.
It always, and it also depends what kind of mood I'm in, and I've
Yep.
seen the original trilogy so many times that I'm like, I love it, but I don't need to see it again. But I apologize, I interrupted. So go on.
No, no problem. For over 30 years, mine was Return of the Jedi, and it was no question. Like that's my favorite, because I didn't like how Empire ended on such a sour note. Like to me, that's not how you end a film. And because I was very young when it came out, and it just didn't. I didn't understand it at all. So I didn't try to over explain it to my kids, but I kind of tried to see where they saw that as that movie ended. And I think they kind of felt the same way. Like, oh, I mean, it was a great movie, but how did they end it like that? Well, it's a
What a
cliffhanger.
bummer. Yeah.
Yeah. Interesting how George Lucas created that sort of formula for films where you don't just wrap everything up at the end of each, even if you're going to have an extra film. And now we've got, the Marvel Cinematic Universe is very much taking that cue. Like
They are.
they do kind of wrap things up, but they also sort of look to the next film, and it's very episodic. So I mean, Lucas literally called them episodes. So there we go.
To that point, I actually think Star Wars is taking a lot of plays from Marvel, where I think they're going to start weaving more threads throughout the different shows. So, like for example, The Mandalorian, Boba, and the Book of Boba Fett take place in the same timeline, and I think there's another show or something that takes place in a similar timeline.
The Ahsoka one too, right? Doesn't that?
Oh yeah,
Yes.
obviously
Yeah.
the Ahsoka one, and I guarantee you in the Book of Boba Fett, Din Djarin's going to show up. There's no doubt in my mind for at least one episode. You're going to see the boots come down, Jabba's steps, and they're going to play the Mando theme. And
Well, look what another character that we just saw introduced a couple of weeks ago on the Bad Batch, and that's Fennec Shand.
yeah,
And so you've got Ming Na Wen playing her in that era, but also in the Book of Boba Fett and in the Mandalorian. And so I think you're exactly right. And Dave Filoni is just a master at that sort of laying the seeds, for future things. He's starting to really make that come to fruition. I think he's been doing it since the Clone Wars, but now that there's been more content, it's starting to become more obvious exactly what you're saying.
just like rest for a split second. With season 2 of The Mandalorian, when they had all these rumors that Ahsoka's going to be in it, and Ezra's going to be in it, and Bo-Katan's going to be in all these characters, I really didn't want any of it because, and don't get me wrong, I loved seeing all of them. But I felt like Dave Filoni did such a great job in season 1 creating these new characters like Cara Dune, like the widow from the fishing village. I'm trying all these other characters they created in that show that I wanted to know more about those guys. Don't get me wrong, I was super excited to see Bo-Katan and super excited to see Ahsoka for sure. But I'm like, I want to know more about the widow.
Right.
As far as Jar Jar, my kids they liked him. They thought it was funny. I think Jar Jar did what was supposed to do for. I think Jar Jar did his job, which was
Right.
my kids laughed, and that was the role. I feel looking back at it now, I wasn't a big Jar Jar fan. The character that actually I didn't like the most was Boss Nass, because I had trouble understanding him a lot when I saw him in the theater, and I just didn't like the and to be honest, Phantom Menace, I kind of left disappointed, and that was where my heart broke a little with Boss Nass. But years later, looking back at it, it's fine, and I don't hate it. I think time heals all wounds. And looking at what the fandom did to Ahmed Best, I'm like, shame on us for that. And Jake Lloyd, I'm like,
Yeah.
you have to remember, it's just a movie. These guys are doing their job, and
Right.
that's Now you both are, and gender shouldn't matter in Star Wars, but you are both girl dads, and why don't you guys tell me your experiences with your daughter? And the only reason why I bring this up, and gender shouldn't matter, but I think a lot more. I remember my age. I think a lot of girls were told that Star Wars is for boys, and you can't like Star Wars. I don't know a lot of women who liked Star Wars when I was a kid, and I think the reason is because they were told it's not for girls, and I think that's radically changed for the good. So I think Kevin, we'll start with you first on this one.
So my sons have always liked it, but they're my oldest, and so they've always come along with it, and it was fine. And my girls, I also introduced them as early as I could. In fact, earlier than I did the boys to some of this content. And my oldest daughter, who's now 16, she loved it. She's at that phase right now where she's like, I'm not really into Star Wars or Marvel. And I think it's because some of her friends aren't really into it. So it could actually be an extension of this whole thing where it's not really for girls or whatever. But she'll come out of it because I know her, and I'm just not pushing her right now. You don't have to be as into it as I am to be a fan. My second daughter, who's my fourth kid, she's 10 and she can't get enough Star Wars. And we've watched every episode of everything together. And she's like, "Can we restart it all again now?" And I'm like, "Well, Daddy's got a job and things we've got to do, but there are, new content coming out." So she never has this idea that Star Wars isn't for her, or that it has anything to do with anything. And it took them 38 years before there was a woman protagonist in Star Wars that was like the main character,
Mhm.
not one of an ensemble. And then we've gotten several, but some political agenda or whatever. I know we'll do that on the one-on-one, but
Yeah, for sure.
um it's it's something I've made sure that I never uh kind of said, okay, well, this is for these two and not for these girls, it's just for the boys or anything like that. So I'm thrilled at my 10-year-old. Now my 8-year-old's like, but she likes the Bad Batch because of Omega.
I love
So,
Omega.
and she loves Baby Yoda, Grogu, and so she watches those shows. And yeah, so I don't pressure any of them, but I'm really thankful for my 10-year-old.
So this is a future question, but I can ask it now just to elaborate a little. Is it important that they like Star Wars?
Yeah, or I could find other kids. I can request. No, if they don't, like I said, my oldest daughter's kind of not into it right now, and that's okay. My wife, it took me a while to get her to watch some of the movies. She's not into it at all,
Mixed
and
marriage.
that's fine. Yeah. But and I don't know if it's her generation or it's just kind of what she's in. She doesn't really like sci-fi unless it's like some epic drama sci-fi. I'm like, well, there's a lot of drama in Star Wars, trust me. Uh, yeah, but you were talking about girls not liking it. Young, all those years ago when we were kids, the girls that I went to college with, the people I hung out with were such nerds that they pretty much all loved Star Wars. And so I was just happy to be, I never said, "Oh, that's not for girls." I think that's dumb.
Oh,
Like I was happy to have girls around me that liked it. And I would make Star Wars jokes and they would get them. And I thought this is before memes were a thing on the internet, right? Before that even existed.
I could tell you that in high school, I used to play Dungeons and Dragons with the boys, and now I know so many women or girls who play Dungeons and Dragons, and I'm like, what? Like,
Right?
you play Dungeons and Dragons? I don't know of any females who ever played Dungeons and Dragons. I'm like, that's the coolest thing I've ever heard in my entire life. Now, Anthony, your daughter, um, I think she's your youngest daughter. She's
Mhm.
super into it, yeah.
Right. Oh yeah, for sure. She's the one that cosplays. Again, like I said, she does Numa, and I'm gonna pat myself in the back. We had a lot of help from a lot of different people, but we all put together, I think, the perfect Numa.
Oh, I
She
agree,
like
Kevin. If you don't
Yeah.
follow Anthony, his daughter is obviously you know who Numa is from the Clone Wars cartoon, and she is just spot on.
Yeah,
Nice.
she when we first started to do it, she's like, "What do I do?" I said, "Just be sad, just act sad." Just like, give me the puppy dog eye. So she's really owned that, and she's really into the Numa character, and she's very excited too because there's the adult version of Numa from Rebels, so she can grow with the character. So as she gets older, I already told her we'd help her out with her adult version of Numa, and she's doing the same now. Like I said, we're putting together her Ahsoka cosplay, and then again, that's another character she can grow with if she decides she wants to continue in Star Wars cosplay. She has the option to make an adult Ahsoka as well. Um, and then my other daughter, early on, I think on the periphery was into Star Wars, never like super into it, but now she's more into like sci-fi horror stuff, and that's kind of her niche. So, we would always have family movie nights on Friday, but now it's kind of like divide and conquer. We all take turns. I'll watch Falcon and Winter Soldier with my son, and then we'll move on to a couple episodes of X-Files with my daughter, and then my other daughter, my youngest, will come on over and we'll watch some Clone Wars cartoons. So what used to be family movie night is individual movie night spread out across a full Friday. So we're packed full of activities and shows.
That's awesome. I need to do that too. It's funny. My daughter, I think, is more into it than my son. Like my son has actually said he doesn't like it, but I think he was mad because I didn't get him V-Bucks for Fortnite. So I think he was trying to stab me in the heart a little, which worked. But it's funny you should mention that because Friday nights is usually my wife and daughter, and we would watch WandaVision, and then we watched Falcon and the Winter Soldier. But my son he does like the Clone Wars, and he's been watching the Bad Batch. But my daughter's definitely more into it. Kevin, I don't know if your kids cosplay at all, but like my daughter, I made her an armor outfit, and she's attracted to strong women as she should be, and I'm really excited for that. When she was like maybe 6 or 7, and I'll probably do a cutaway in the podcast to that right here. We were playing a game where I'm like, "What does Princess Leia say?" And she's like, "You're my only hope." I'm like, "What does Jin say?" "I rebel." "What does Ahsoka say?" "I'm no Jedi." And what does Rey say? "No ma." But but I really love that she loves it, and I know the days going to come where Kevin's daughter is, where she's probably going to be told by some popular girls or mean girls that you shouldn't be into that, and I'll be sad for a bit, but she'll come back.
Nobody's ever really gone.
Exactly. And my son, it's weird. I think what his thing is, I think he's just not into cosplay, and he's 11. So I'm in the Rebel Legion. So we used to volunteer their school fundraiser. I would bring the Rebel Legion to 501st there, and we would troop there. And it occurred to me that I mostly do Obi-Wan, but it occurred to me, hey, he's a 4th grader, because we didn't do it last year, but I'm like, he's a 4th grader. Maybe I shouldn't show my face, because maybe this isn't as cool as I think it is, and I didn't want him to be teased. So I'm like, oh, I think I'll go as Kylo Ren this year. But yeah, I think he's into it, but not as much as me and my daughter, and that's okay too. I do try to keep this show to a half hour, and we are approaching that. But I don't know. Do you guys have anything else to add as far as being Star Wars dads? Like for example, like your collections, raising kids for me, and having props and comic books and things that look fun to a kid are like, oh no, we don't touch that helmet. Here's the cheap helmet you can play with. Do you guys have any experiences with that? We'll start with Anthony this time.
I have a lot of stuff for my costumes, and so like the lightsabers are movie quality or really nicely done and put together. Expensive sometimes too, and then we will get other lightsabers for the kids to play with, and then so my son will see my nice one that I had custom made and be like, when can I get one of those? And I'm like, well, you got that one right there. Yeah, but yours does that. I want that one. So there's a lot of stuff, but the props they're really cool. I mean, growing up,
let me just stop you for 1 second. Both of you, have you guys taken your kids to Galaxy's Edge yet?
Yes.
I've only been to a Disney park once in my life, and it was like 3 months before that opened with all my kids. We were there, and I was just like, we didn't get to see that. So we will go as soon as we can afford it. It's cost prohibitive for a family of 7, but
I could not agree more with you on the cost prohibitiveness. But if you do get a chance to go, and this is not cheap either, but the building the lightsaber at Savi's workshop is.
Oh, we'll definitely do that. We'll save up for that. They all want to do it.
It's a very emotional experience. Like, my wife cried, and again, she's not into any of this, and she teared up. So, Anthony, sorry about that. I interrupted you for a sec.
Oh yeah, no. I'm just saying that it's cool to have props, and when they get to see all the different things that we do for cosplay here, and they all want to be part of it or have something like it. And when you do something for one kid, it's hard not to do it for all of them. So it was hard when we did do Savi's workshop, for example. It was just my middle son and I went. I didn't know at the time that you can go in as a guardian. I thought you had to pay entry, so I ended up getting a lightsaber.
Oh, funny.
But it was fun for me too. I didn't need one, but it was fun to have one, and I just gifted that to my daughter, so that's hers now. But yeah, there's a lot of things, and a lot of the kids find different interests in different props and different parts and pieces. Some things that they know are just for me, for my costuming, and they're not ever gonna touch or use it. But maybe one day when they're old enough, and I quit doing the cosplay, I'll give my Vader or my clone to one of my kids, and they can continue it on if they so choose. So, it could be theirs one day if they want it. It's up to them. If not, no big deal too. Put it on a mannequin and show it off.
Quick question about kids and props and all that. So, because of our geography and because we're in the 501st, we in the Rebel Legion, we have been invited to Lucasfilm several times. Have you ever been, and have you ever brought your kids? And did they?
No, I didn't get approved until 2019. So, I think that I missed the one that they were doing in 2019. Then of course the pandemic hit, so I haven't had the opportunity yet. Obi-Wan Ranch, anything like that, just yet. So when those come up, I'll see about getting us in to take a look. So I know we've been to Lucasfilm, just walking around the Presidio area, but not inside or anything like that. So it'd be nice to take them. I think they would enjoy that, seeing all the cool stuff that it has inside.
Oh, sure. And but it's funny with my kids, they're like, cool. And I'm like, guys, that's we're in a theater that the public doesn't go, and we're seeing, this. And then Dave Filoni takes the stage and he's taking questions, and my kids are like, can we go? I'm like, are you kidding? This is the important part. Dave Filoni is telling us the reason why this happened or what was going on in this person's head. You want to leave now? I'm like, all right, let's go. So Kevin, what about you and your collection and the kids and
Uh, Before I jump into the collection stuff, so there was an exhibit that I don't know what the status of it is. If it's like there were a bunch of props from the original films that were making their way around several museums in the country. And I lived in Texas at the time. And I think my sons were probably 8 or 9. And this is before we knew that we were going to get more Star Wars,
right?
after even the Clone Wars and things like that. And there were all these things from like literally in the films, like props from the films. And I wish I'd had a better digital, camera back then. I would have taken tons of pictures. I never even conceived that I would be on TikTok, or something like that back then. Uh, but I got to see like the speeder that Luke had, and my kids were
Oh,
really into that. They're like, "Oh, that was the one in the movie, the one he rode across Tatooine." Like, yeah, that's the one. Touch it. We could barely
right.
reach over the rope and touch it, and see other props like that. That was just so cool to them. We were always pretty financially strapped because my wife and I got married uh, the day after we graduated from college, and incidentally, the next week was the Phantom Menace being released. So there were a lot of things going on we had 2 kids right off the bat, like within a couple of years, and so I never really got into collecting as an adult until I had kids that were old enough to get Legos. And this is a secret for all you dads out there. If you want to build your Lego Star Wars collection, start buying them for your kids. And when they're not as much into them, you can offer to house them, which is what I do. I have tons of Star Wars Legos, and most of them belong to my kids. Now, this X-Wing behind me, that's mine, and they bought that for me. That's a Red 5 back there, and
Nice.
that's my prized possession. They know they don't play with that one. But they bought it for me one year for Christmas, and so I'm really proud of them for that one. But like this Imperial shuttle and tons of other things I bought for them, not really thinking, hey, I'm gonna, secretly, you know, keep all the Legos to myself. But they don't have a place to put them anywhere. My sons don't want to drag them all to college. I took my Legos to college though, so I think they're just not dedicated. And I still have my Legos from like the 80s, right? Like they didn't have Star Wars back then, but we had to make our own Star Wars stuff back then. So that's kind of we've been very, uh, I'm trying to think, not careful, just selective with what we even collect. So we had like really cheap, telescoping, like uh, lightsaber blade,
Oh,
the
yeah, yeah, yeah.
real cheap ones. So they could do that for a while. And one of my sons was a clone for Halloween one year, and I couldn't get the other one to do it. I thought, well, they're identical twins, and
That
they're
would have
also
been perfect.
half Asian, and so they could pass, for one of the Tamara Morrison clones, if they wanted to, the way do their hair like that. And
Sure.
they- I just one year I'm going to get one of them to do Rex and the other one to be Cody or
Cody.
something like that, right? Like I just, of course, they're going to fight for who's Rex.
Mhm.
And I'll say
Your sons are
whoever
both your
Rex
sons
will
are
be my
both your
favorite
sons are
son.
both accomplished martial artists, yeah?
They are. They both. In fact, we were just talking tonight. They've been away for a year, so they haven't done as much. But they're about to do another test for. They're in kung fu. They actually teach traditional kung fu. So does my wife, and all my kids are into that. So, like, they're really excited for the Shang-Chi movie to come
Yeah.
out. So, but also to see like Donnie Yen in Rogue One, and to be doing, like kung fu type moves, they were totally into that, because that was the first time they really felt represented in Star Wars, at least racially and
Sure.
culturally. So that was a lot of fun.
Awesome. Um, so guys, so like I said, I do try to keep this definitely under an hour, so we're approaching the end. So, um, Anthony, any closing thoughts about being a Star Wars dad, and then also to the 16 people who might see this, where they can find you on social media of any kind?
Yeah, so just going back to your interview that you had with Mark, I watched that, and just hearing that he's going to be a new father here soon. I remember those days. My youngest is almost 5, so it's not too far removed. So I remember that, but just there's nothing like being a dad. There's nothing that compares to it. And then of course being in the Star Wars fandom, there's, in my opinion, no other fandom like it. And then being able to bridge those two together at any opportunity, I think is fantastic. And being able to watch Star Wars through the eyes of your children, it kind of resets the whole franchise, and it makes me as a dad feel young again. It makes me appreciate Star Wars that much more. So, to anyone who's watching as a dad and going to become a dad, to have those experiences and opportunities to watch Star Wars again through your kids' eyes, I think is awesome. For my social media, Super Bombad Dad on both Instagram and TikTok. I haven't really been too active on TikTok recently, but I try and get as much on there as I can with my schedule. But yeah, Super Bombad Dad. And thanks again, Jason.
Sure. And the legendary J. Kevin Parker.
So my advice to any parents out there would be, if you're really into these movies, whether your kids are or not, if you can just share them casually with them and enjoy the experience, that's really what it's supposed to be about. And it's fun that we can kind of get into it and be really nerdy about it. But if they're not, that's fine too. The main thing for me was sharing the experience and the joy and the cultural, just there's so many icons like Darth Vader and things like that from our childhood. Like, these have been part of our culture forever, and so sharing that, I think, is important, whether or not they're going to be like super huge stars going forward, or fans of Star Wars going forward. But also to make sure that you really focus in on, there's some great moral lessons in this franchise,
I agree.
and there's so many things that like every time some punk on TikTok is hating on the sequels, and they're like, I hate, Ray Palpatine and all this stuff. I was like, well, hate leads to suffering. I
Right.
don't think they understand that that in one of their favorite movies, right, in that part of the franchise, that little lessons like that, we can learn from those lessons. Even
Absolutely.
sometimes a couple of the guys on the dark side might have a nugget of wisdom here and there, like let the past die, kill it if you have to. uh, yeah, I can't wait to talk about that, and as trolling some Star Wars fans. But yeah, so just these are opportunities to have as I heard Lucas put it one time, a rip roaring good time, with your kids, and that's who it's made for. Let's not forget that, and we can all stay kids and keep watching it, which I think is awesome. So
And
enjoy it. That's the main key.
that's the main key. I agree. And where can I mean, I know where I can.
Oh, so on almost all the socials, I'm J. Kevin Parker, the letter J, my first initial, Kevin Parker. That was something I established years ago. It was easier to be different because, yeah, there are a lot of other ones. I'm not the guy from Australia in the band, okay, if you couldn't tell. But there's also my YouTube, which I swear now that, especially now I've got a setup, I literally just got this boom mic and everything today.
I know that is
So
a nice setup by the. Oh my
I,
God, got it today. I'm so honored that you broke it out for this.
yeah, and I got some
You're a
more of
better
the phone
podcaster for to
panels
use that
coming
for.
out. So I seriously, I keep promising my fans that I'm going to start doing more YouTube videos. I'm really going to start doing more YouTube videos now that I won't sound like I'm in a tin can when I'm recording them. So
That's awesome. And it's. I should also point out that this microphone is just for show. It's not even connected. But
you're not the only one that does that, by the way. Lots of people do, and that's
oh,
fine.
really? That's funny. Yeah, sometimes you see guys doing like TikToks holding the end of their jack that goes into their phone. I'm like, what? What is that? Um, guys, first of all, thank you again for participating in this. I hope you both have a great Father's Day. Anthony, I love you, and I hope to actually meet you someday. I know we chat all the time. Kevin, I do love you, and I think again you are a strong, positive voice in TikTok, but also in the fandom kind of like Dark Choco, where you are a voice that's needed out there. And
Thank you.
what did we call you, Reverend Kev or
Definitely.
Professor Kev? Professor Kev, right?
Professor Kev, I've thought about a Preacher Kev account, but that's going to be a totally separate thing. Yeah, so and that's a nickname. People ask me, "Are you really a professor?" Well, I've taught some college level stuff as a resource, not actually the professor. So it's just a nickname that some of my professional development students have given me and things like that. So I
Awesome.
use that on TikTok for fun.
Awesome. All right. Well, again, gentlemen, have a very great Father's Day with your family, and I'll catch you guys on social media. So thanks again for coming.
Happy Father's Day to you too. Thank you.
And may the force be with you.
And to you.